The grainy periscope photographs told a story that would shatter everything Japanese naval intelligence thought they understood about warfare. Through the trembling lens of submarine I-47, something impossible had been captured on film near Ulithi Atoll. The images made no sense. A massive concrete vessel floated in enemy waters. No visible weapons. No armor plating. Instead, heavy refrigeration equipment dominated the deck space. Small craft moved constantly around this mysterious ship. They transferred cargo that intelligence officers couldn't identify. The date was March 11, 1945. At Kanoya Air Base on Kyushu, the intelligence officer's hands shook as he studied these reconnaissance photos. What he was seeing contradicted every principle of naval warfare the Imperial Japanese Navy had ever known. 24 Yokosuka, P-1Y-1 Francis bombers sat ready on the airfield. Operation Tan No. 2 would send these explosive-laden aircraft into the American fleet. The pilots, most with fewer than 50 hours of training, prepared for their final missions. They would crash into enemy ships at Ulithi. None of them knew they were attacking a fleet that included a $1 million floating factory. A factory that existed solely to produce ice cream. 500 gallons every shift. 5 tons daily of frozen dessert. 10 gallons manufactured every 7 minutes. While Japanese forces scraped pine bark to create aviation fuel, the pine root oil program had mobilized the entire nation. 400,000 workers operated 34,000 distillation units. They processed 70,000 barrels of pine oil. The total yield would be only 3,000 barrels of usable aviation fuel, less than what the U.S. Navy consumed in a single day. American sailors complained about ice cream flavors, while Japanese mechanics drained industrial alcohol from equipment. They burned this alcohol to power aircraft engines. The contrast was beyond comprehension. Evidence had been accumulating for months. Prisoner interrogations after the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 provided the first disturbing hints. When the carrier Zuikaku sank on October 25th, American destroyers pulled Japanese sailors from oil-slicked waters. The destroyers Wakatsuki and Kwa rescued 862 officers and men. 842 crew members had perished in the black waters. These survivors expected immediate execution. Instead, they received medical treatment. Hot food appeared. Then something none of them had ever encountered before. Frozen cream served in metal cups. One survivor's account, preserved in Allied interrogation files, described the impossible moment. An American sailor brought him what he called ice cream. The Japanese sailor had heard of this dessert, but never tasted it. Here, after the greatest naval battle in history, Americans served frozen desserts to enemies who had tried to kill them moments before. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi suppressed these reports immediately. He had created the kamikaze special attack units. His pilots needed to believe Americans were weak, unable to endure hardship. How else could Japanese spirit overcome industrial superiority? The truth would destroy what remained of fighting morale. Commander Zenji Orita commanded submarine I-47 from July 10, 1944, through the war's end. In December 1944, he surfaced near Ulithi for periscope reconnaissance. His mission was to launch Chiton-manned torpedoes against the anchored fleet. Orita's log, preserved in Japanese naval archives, recorded the impossible observation. Large concrete vessel spotted at 0630 hours, approximately 80 meters in length. No visible armament. Heavy refrigeration equipment mounted on deck. Multiple small craft conducting continuous transfers. What Orita had discovered was the U.S. Navy's barge, refrigerated, large. The BRL, converted from an Army concrete barge at a cost of $1 million, equivalent to $17.2 million in 2024 currency. This vessel existed for one purpose: ice cream production. The barge operated around the clock, 7 days a week, 24 hours daily. It stored 2,000 gallons at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Production never stopped. 10 gallons manufactured every 7 minutes, 500 gallons per shift, approximately 5 tons daily. By January 1945, Japan's situation had deteriorated beyond Western comprehension. Fuel scarcity meant the battleship Yamato could only conduct training exercises at anchor. The mighty vessel couldn't waste oil on sea trials. The 343rd Naval Air Group faced severe malnutrition. Captain Minoru Genda commanded this elite unit. He had been the architect of Pearl Harbor. Now he struggled with starving pilots. Genda took command on January 15, 1945. His mission was clearing airspace for kamikaze operations. Pilots reported night blindness from vitamin deficiency. Their reflexes had slowed dramatically. They couldn't withstand G-forces during combat maneuvers. Captain Genda wrote in operational reports that his pilots' eyes failed them at night. Malnutrition had stolen their vision. They shook during combat maneuvers from weakness. Yet they faced an enemy who grew stronger each day. The contrast was starkest in the kamikaze units. These pilots, many still teenagers, received final meals before their one-way missions: rice balls, dried fish, ceremonial sake. They wore 1,000-stitch belts sewn by women for spiritual protection. Everyone knew no cloth could protect against anti-aircraft fire. At Kanoya Air Base, kamikaze pilots wrote their death poems. One pilot's verse, preserved in the museum today, read like cherry blossoms in spring, "Let us fall pure and radiant." These young men died attempting to crash into ships where American crews consumed 3,000 gallons of ice cream during the 3-week repair period. USS Randolph CV-15 suffered damage at 2007 hours on March 11th. One Francis bomber successfully struck the carrier's stern. 25 sailors died. 105 were wounded. The ship was repaired using 29 tons of structural steel. Some of this steel came from a Japanese sugar mill on Saipan. Ulithi represented something beyond Japanese comprehension. This tiny coral atoll, often missing from maps, had become the world's largest naval facility. By March 1945, 722 ships anchored in its lagoon. More vessels than the entire Japanese Navy ever possessed at its peak. This was the staging point for the Okinawa invasion. Base facilities defied understanding. Complete machine shops operated in floating dry docks. The Fleet Post Office handled 20 tons of mail daily. Movie theaters showed Hollywood films. Baseball diamonds covered Mogmog Island. A bakery ship produced fresh bread continuously. USS Abaton distilled seawater and baked pies. The ice cream barge became legendary among American sailors. Destroyer crews sent boats with empty containers. They returned with gallons of vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry ice cream. The barge served everyone equally, from admirals to seamen. Democracy through dairy products. Captain Tamechi Hara was Japan's most successful destroyer commander. He survived all major battles from Pearl Harbor to the war's end. He commanded destroyers Amatsukaze and Shigura through 14 major engagements. Learning about American comfort provisions shattered his understanding. "We thought at first the intelligence was wrong," Hara wrote in his memoir, Japanese Destroyer Captain. "Ships dedicated to ice cream? While we scraped for fuel? It was incomprehensible that any navy would prioritize such luxury during total war." Japanese naval intelligence reviewed intercepted American supply manifests. The documents seemed to be in code. Surely ice cream mix meant ammunition. Chocolate syrup indicated fuel oil. Strawberry topping represented medical supplies. No military force would prioritize actual dessert ingredients during intense combat operations. But evidence accumulated relentlessly. Prisoners reported ice cream aboard every American vessel above destroyer size. Reconnaissance showed refrigerated vessels at every American base. Supply manifests consistently included tonnage for morale supplies. These supplies exceeded total Japanese food rations for entire fleets. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto commanded submarine I-58. He would sink USS Indianapolis on July 30, 1945. His earlier reconnaissance missions provided the most detailed Japanese observations. He observed through his periscope what seemed impossible. In his memoir, Sunk, The Story of the Japanese Submarine Fleet, Hashimoto wrote that Americans operated floating cities of abundance. While Japanese forces counted their last torpedoes and rationed fuel by the liter, Americans maintained peacetime routines in wartime. This was strength beyond imagination, the power to be comfortable during apocalypse. His executive officer recorded similar observations. They saw sailors in lines at what appeared to be refreshment stands. Ships transferred not fuel or ammunition, but white containers. They later learned these contained ice cream. Americans fought a different war entirely. Japanese pilots shot down and rescued by Americans reported treatment that contradicted everything they had been told. During Operation Kikusui, the 10 mass kamikaze attacks on Okinawa between April and June 1945, captured pilots provided remarkable testimony. One pilot captured after engine failure prevented his suicide attack recorded his experience in post-war interrogation files. The destroyer conducted normal operations during their attack. No panic among the crew. Men remained at regular stations, except gunners. White uniformed sailors continued serving food. The ship's routine continued. This was not the desperate enemy they expected. What these pilots witnessed was American confidence in their anti-aircraft defenses. This confidence allowed normal shipboard routines to continue during attacks. While kamikaze pilots approached on death missions, American sailors maintained ice cream service on deck. American ice cream production in the Pacific reached industrial scale by 1945. It dwarfed entire Japanese food programs. The Navy barge at Ulithi produced 500 gallons daily. Army ice cream barges, 3 vessels, produced 1,500 gallons daily combined. Every carrier, battleship, and cruiser had production machines. Base facilities operated multiple plants per location. In 1943, 135 million pounds of dehydrated mix were shipped globally. The Army Quartermaster Corps managed annual production of 80 million gallons for military consumption. Japanese reality painted a different picture entirely. The Pine Root Oil Program managed only 3,000 barrels total from 34,000 distillation units. Aviation fuel reserves dropped below 1,500,000 barrels by 1945. Civilian calories fell from 2,000 pre-war to 1,680 by summer 1945. Tokyo rations provided 775 calories daily for 6 months in 1946. Pilot training was limited to 40 to 50 hours due to fuel shortage. For perspective, the entire Japanese military's daily rice ration for home island forces totaled less tonnage than American ice cream consumption in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Chester Nimitz personally approved the ice cream barge. He understood something Japanese military hierarchy couldn't accept. Morale wasn't built solely on ideology and sacrifice. In a classified memo, Nimitz wrote that Japanese forces expected American men to endure their conditions and break. Americans would demonstrate that industrial might extended to crew comfort. A sailor who knew his country could provide ice cream in combat fought with different confidence than one expecting only hardship. This philosophy extended throughout the Pacific Fleet. The USS Lexington incident at the Coral Sea on May 8, 1942, became legend. Sailors raided ice cream stores before abandoning ship. They literally scooped ice cream into their helmets before entering life rafts. These priorities were incomprehensible to Japanese military culture built on suffering as virtue. Japanese naval officers who learned about American ice cream operations faced an impossible choice. How could they maintain fighting spirit when the truth would destroy morale? How could they explain that while Japanese sailors received 315 grams of rice daily when available, Americans consumed 5 tons of ice cream from a single barge? Rear Admiral Matome Ugaki commanded battleship operations. He would lead the final kamikaze mission on August 15, 1945. After receiving intelligence reports of American comfort levels, he wrote in his diary that if such reports were true, they had misunderstood this war entirely. Spirit could not overcome an enemy who brought luxury to battle. This information was classified above top secret. Officers who learned of it swore absolute silence. But truth seeps through walls of secrecy. It spread through the fleet in whispers and rumors. Japanese radar operators noted B-29 bombers circling at high altitude for no tactical reason. Post-war evidence revealed crews were making ice cream. They mixed powdered milk, sugar, and cocoa in ammunition cans. They used -50 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures at 30,000 feet to freeze the mixture. Turbulence churned it into ice cream. This level of confidence was staggering, making dessert over enemy territory while Japanese fighters desperately launched, powered by pine root oil. It represented civilizational surplus applied to warfare. While Japanese mechanics drained hydraulic fluid to burn as emergency fuel, American air crews improvised ice cream makers at bombing altitude. Operation Kikusui sent 10 massive kamikaze waves against the American fleet at Okinawa. Between April 6 and June 22, 1945, 1,465 kamikaze aircraft attacked. 4,000 Japanese pilots died in these attacks. They flew obsolete aircraft powered by alcohol-diluted fuel that reduced engine performance by 30%. Their final meals consisted of rice balls and water, often their only substantial food in days. After the massive April 6, 1945 attack involving 355 kamikaze aircraft, American fleet reports noted that morale remained high. Ice cream consumption increased 40% post-action. The psychological impact of ice cream after combat cannot be overstated. It represented normalcy, comfort, home. Japanese naval personnel captured at Okinawa, 11,250 surrendered in total, provided detailed accounts that shattered Japanese assumptions. One destroyer officer pulled from the water after his ship sank reported through interpreters his shock at the treatment. He expected torture, perhaps execution. The treatment they gave American prisoners. Instead, a young American sailor, younger than his youngest brother, brought him ice cream. Vanilla in a metal cup. The sailor seemed embarrassed they had run out of chocolate. The Japanese officer cried, not from gratitude, but from understanding they had already lost. A nation that provided ice cream to enemies had won before fighting began. These accounts, suppressed during the war, but documented in occupation records, revealed the gulf between the two forces. It exceeded anything Japanese command had imagined. During the occupation starting August 1945, American forces distributed ice cream to Japanese children. Many tasted it for the first time in their lives. The psychological impact proved profound. Everything the military government had told the Japanese people about American barbarism and weakness was disproven by a simple frozen dessert. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace with 64 confirmed victories, tasted ice cream for the first time at a U.S. air base in 1946. He later wrote in his memoir, Samurai, that he finally understood why they lost. Japanese forces fought, believing suffering made them strong. Americans fought with the confidence of abundance. Japan thought comfort was weakness. America knew comfort was a right their industry could guarantee anywhere. The final numbers tell the complete story of two nations fighting entirely different kinds of war. American production in 1945 included the Navy ice cream barge producing 500 gallons daily, 10 gallons per 7 minutes. Army barges, 3 vessels, produced 1,500 gallons daily combined. Total military ice cream reached 80 million gallons annually. Dehydrated mix in 1943 totaled 135 million pounds shipped globally. Equipment meant every ship above destroyer size had ice cream machines. Cost reached $1 million per barge, $17.2 million in 2024 dollars. Japanese reality in 1945 showed rice rations of 315 grams daily per sailor when available. Pine root oil totaled 3,000 barrels from 70,000 barrels of pine oil. 400,000 workers were mobilized for the pine root program. 34,000 distillation units were deployed nationwide. Pilot training was reduced to 40 to 50 hours versus 500 plus pre-war. Fuel quality included 30% alcohol mixture reducing engine performance. For Japanese military culture built on Bushido, the way of the warrior, and the acceptance of suffering as spiritual purification, American ice cream ships represented something incomprehensible. Americans saw comfort not as weakness, but as a strength multiplier. Abundance was not decadence, but strategic advantage. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived the war. He later converted to Christianity and became a pacifist. Asked about his transformation, he said he learned Americans fed ice cream to their enemies. Not just food, but luxury food. This was not the barbaric enemy they were told about. This was a civilization so confident in victory they could afford kindness and comfort during war. The ice cream ships challenged every assumption about warfare that Japanese military culture held sacred. At a 1985 U.S.-Japan veteran reunion in Hawaii, the cultural gap remained evident 40 years later. Former CB Robert Mitchell had worked on the Ulithi base. Japanese veterans asked him about the ice cream barge, still struggling to understand it. Mitchell shrugged. They figured boys fighting needed ice cream. It didn't seem special at the time. It was just what you did. Take care of the troops. If they could build it, why wouldn't they? This casual attitude that ice cream was so normal, so expected, that its provision in wartime seemed unremarkable, illustrated the gulf between the navies better than any battle statistics. Former kamikaze pilot trainer Tadamasa Itatsu attended the reunion. He responded that they trained boys to die with empty stomachs. Americans trained boys to live with full stomachs and dessert. This difference explained everything about the war. Dr. John Dower, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning Embracing Defeat, Japan in the Wake of World War II, wrote that the ice cream barge at Ulithi was worth more than a fleet of battleships as demonstration of American power. It said they could afford this luxury. They had already won. They were simply waiting for Japan to realize it. Military historian Richard Frank noted that Japanese forces fought expecting to die gloriously. American forces fought expecting to live comfortably. This wasn't just a different strategy. It was a different civilization's approach to warfare. Today, at the Kanoya Air Base Museum in Kagoshima Prefecture, a memorial honors the kamikaze pilots who flew from this base. A small, often overlooked placard mentions American ice cream ships. Added in the 1990s, it provides context for understanding the impossible disparity these pilots faced. The museum displays a kamikaze pilot's final meal: a small rice ball, pickled vegetables, and a cup of sake. Next to this sits a photograph of the American ice cream barge at Ulithi, obtained from U.S. Navy archives. No explanation is needed. The image tells the entire story of the Pacific War. Museum curator Takashi Yamada explained they added this display because visitors, especially young people, couldn't understand how Japan lost so completely. When they see that America built ships just for ice cream while Japan scraped pine trees for fuel, they understand. It wasn't just military defeat. It was the collision of scarcity with abundance. The story of Japanese commanders discovering American ice cream ships reveals the fundamental nature of power in modern warfare. Japan believed power came from spirit, from will, from the ability to endure unlimited suffering. America demonstrated that true power came from the ability to eliminate suffering, to provide abundance, to maintain normalcy, even in extremity. The kamikaze pilots, noble in their sacrifice, flew into an enemy fighting a fundamentally different kind of war. While Japan scraped pine roots for fuel, producing 3,000 barrels from 34,000 distillation units, America built million-dollar ice cream barges. While Japanese pilots wrote death poems before their final 50-hour training flights, American sailors chose between vanilla and chocolate. While Japan measured victory in spiritual terms, America measured it in industrial output, including the output of ice cream at 10 gallons every 7 minutes. The war ended not when Japan ran out of pilots willing to die. They never did. But when Japanese leadership finally understood what they were fighting against. Not just military might, but a society so powerful it could dedicate ships to desert. So confident it saw comfort as essential. So abundant it could afford to be wasteful with luxury items while fighting a global war. In the final analysis, the statistics tell everything. American ships at Ulithi numbered 722. Japanese ships in the entire Navy at peak numbered approximately 700. American ice cream production reached 500 gallons per shift from one barge. Japanese aviation fuel from pine roots totaled 3,000 barrels. American bomber crews made ice cream at 30,000 feet. Japanese pilots received 40 to 50 hours training on diluted fuel. American sailors complained about ice cream flavors. Japanese sailors received 350 grams of rice when available. Japanese commanders who discovered America had ships just for making ice cream discovered something more profound than military intelligence. They discovered they were fighting an enemy who had already won, who knew they had won, and who were so certain of victory they brought dessert to the apocalypse. The ice cream ships proved what the atomic bombs only confirmed. Japan was fighting the last war of scarcity against the first war of abundance. The outcome was as inevitable as it was incomprehensible to those who believed suffering was strength. They learned too late that true strength was having so much power you never had to suffer at all. The million-dollar ice cream barge at Ulithi, producing its 10 gallons every 7 minutes while Japanese pilots prepared to die, was not just a ship. It was proof of a civilization that had already won the war before it began. In their world of bitter pine root fuel and desperate sacrifice, American ice cream ships were not just incomprehensible. They were proof that Japan had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the war they were fighting. They had brought spirit to a contest of industrial abundance. They had brought suffering to a battle against comfort. They had already lost.